Hello and welcome back to another podcast. There may be no F1 going on at the minute while we're in the summer break, but we are still here and there is still plenty to talk about. Red Bull have made the first move of the driver market. They've demoting Gasly, promoting Albon to the Red Bull seat. And if you want to hear our detailed thoughts on that, you can go to the podcast that we previously released. But today we'll be taking a more general look over silly season, talking about every single team, what the driver lineup is going to be for 2020, what I think will happen. And to do that, I'll be joined by Aritra, as always.
Yeah, hi. Yes, we're back again.
Absolutely. So, F1 never sleeps. So, so to kick us off there, we're just going to go through each team, so who we think, talk through the potential candidates, who we think is going to get the seat. So, there's only one place to start. Championship leaders in both standings. Hamilton leading championship. Bottas hanging on to second. Mercedes. So we've got one pension driver. Lewis Hamilton will be in the Mercedes next season, no doubt. But there is debate over who will be his teammate next year.
Yeah, and that is everybody's expecting Bottas to be the first domino that will, set off the driver market, just like Daniel Ricciardo did last year.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got the options. Mercedes, Toto Wolff has come out and said we're deciding over the summer break, and we're going to choose between Bottas and Esteban Ocon. Of course, Esteban Ocon, Mercedes youth driver, was in a seat with Force India until he lost his drive when Lawrence Stroll took over the team, put his own son in there, and Ocon wasn't able to have a seat. So Ocon is without. So I'll ask you this: Ocon is without a drive. Do you think that is going to negatively affect his chances of getting this Mercedes seat?
See, when it comes to Mercedes, I feel that, as you mentioned in one of the previous podcasts, that Mercedes are in a perfect situation right now where their lead driver is clearly quicker than their second driver, as in Lewis Hamilton is pretty evidently quicker than Valtteri Bottas. But then their second driver, Bottas, he is quick enough to be P2 in the championship, and that is all they want, so that they can secure their constructors title, and that is what matters to them ultimately. Both the championships backed up pretty early, and that is what is going to be this season as far as so far goes. So yeah, and like you mentioned in the Hungarian Grand Prix review that we did, most of what Mercedes is saying to the media right now is just media talk, and in reality, I think they will hold on to Bottas because that is a consistent lineup, and Lewis likes Valtteri, so I don't really see any reason for them to drop Valtteri, even though he has had pathetic last two races. But for the season that he's had and for the turnaround that he's had since 2018, I believe that he has done enough to retain his seat, and it would be very, very unfair on Mercedes to drop him this season. So yeah, it's going to be Lewis Hamilton and Bottas for me. But then looking at Red Bull picking up Albon into the first team, I secretly wish that it would be George Russell who will be the second Mercedes. But then you have to kind of take into account that George Russell hasn't realistically fought the midfield yet. So you wouldn't want to put somebody in the lead car, in the best car on the grid, arguably. You don't want to put somebody in that car who hasn't even fought the midfield. So that is the only reason why I feel George Russell will not be considered by Mercedes, even though I feel he should be because he's talented enough. But yeah, it's going to be Hamilton Bottas. What about you? I mean, do you echo the same?
I think you're right then. There's a lot to consider for Mercedes. Obviously, Bottas 2.0 has not survived the early round of the season. He's very much back to the Bottas of before, a long way off the pace, certainly in the races. And he's had a dip in form at exactly the wrong time. So that is something that's going to go against him. Ocon, there is the problem of he's still only 22 himself. He lacks experience and that recent experience as well. So he did well at Force India, did what he could at Manor, but he's been out. By the time the season comes around, he'd been out of Formula One for a year, and even before that, we would have said he was inexperienced. So that counts against him. And obviously, you've got the team dynamic, as you mentioned, as we've said before, and it's a well-known fact in F1. Lewis Hamilton is very happy with Bottas. Their two characters just work. He knows Bottas isn't going to push him in that way, whereas Ocon is a much more feisty and aggressive character. And we saw how the relationship with Sergio Perez was just a nightmare for Force India. It was an absolute nightmare, and they literally had to step in and stop their drivers racing. And obviously, Toto Wolff knows not stopping them racing, but certainly the relationship wise, he knows what that feels like, and Mercedes will be desperate not to go down that route again. I really, they must have secretly breathed a sigh of relief when Rosberg left, because trying to manage that relationship while the Ferraris were pushing them would have been almost impossible. So, anyway, so they don't want to be left in that situation. And Russell's giving himself something to think about. Obviously, Williams has shown a bit more pace, and Russell was right up there fighting with the midfield, but I think you're right. I think it's a bit too soon for Russell, because Ocon is there. I don't think they'll consider him. If Ocon wasn't in the picture, I think they would be considering him. But I feel like if you're going to go with a younger driver with less experience right now, Ocon has a bit more priority over Russell. He's got himself more established, but it needs to be this year for Ocon. Like, Ocon needs a seat. If you spend 2 years out, if you spend 1 year out, you can get back in. But if you spend 2 years out, then that's a concern. I don't think you get back in then. So we'll talk about that later. But I think Ocon will get a seat. But I think Mercedes will keep the steady option, and they will go Hamilton and Bottas for 2020, when there's going to be, no reg changes. When the reg changes and they feel like they're going to be pushed a bit more, maybe they'll kind of. I don't think we'll see Bottas and Mercedes in 2021, but for next season, my prediction is Hamilton and Bottas.
Yeah, cool. Being dull, that's good. So one dull lineup, prediction-wise, to another dull lineup, prediction-wise again, would be, I think, the people who are currently second in the championship, Ferrari. They have pretty much solidified their lineup, and to be honest, I don't really see a change in that, because the only question in that lineup for 2020 would have been Sebastian Vettel contemplating retirement, but then that seems out of the picture since Germany. And Ferrari is happy with the driver lineup, even though Leclerc might not be, but Sebastian is okay with it. So I don't really see any reason for change there. And I don't really see any reason why they should change their lineup for 2020 at least. I honestly think it'll be just the same, Leclerc and Vettel. I would like to believe that you have the same prediction as well for Ferrari.
I do. Obviously, Leclerc nailed on. Vettel, 95%. Obviously, Vettel keeps dropping in these hints about retiring, and I don't think that's really in his mind right now. And it's worth Ferrari. The only thing with this pairing is, do Ferrari look at changing the kind of the hierarchy of it? We've talked about it before. Clearly Ferrari favour Vettel. There's been a lot of times this season where they've put him on the ideal strategy, or they've not run their cars at the same strategy. They've given Vettel one which helps him overtake Leclerc. So that's kind of the talking point. Leclerc will be asking the team going into next season, why do we not have equal status? So on and so on. But those two will be in the car next season, no doubt. So that brings us on to Red Bull. We've talked about in depth a long way into the whole debate, so we won't go into it now. We won't cover old ground. You can go and listen to the old podcast for that. The thing with this is 2020 though, they've only tied down Albon until the end of this season in 2019, so this seat may again be open for 2020. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and actually I have considered a lot, and I've started hoping again as a Kvyat fan. I mean, I almost call myself a fan because I've been admiring him so much, at least this season. And I would like to believe, I mean, I would like to hope that Kvyat gets his seat finally, but I don't really see it happening, to be honest, because, I don't think anybody in the entire Red Bull management, Red Bull and Toro Rosso combined, anybody in the management apart from Franz Tost really likes Kvyat. If I'm being honest with you, so unless Franz Tost can just do a little bit of convincing on Kvyat's part to Marco and Horner, I don't really see Kvyat coming back, which leads me to believe that it might just be Hulkenberg in the second Red Bull seat, because we already know who the team leader is and who he is going to be there next year. He's not going to Mercedes, he's not going anywhere. Max Verstappen will be in that seat. And I just believe that it might be Hulkenberg because they will be looking for consistency, and Hulkenberg is out of contract next year. So I would like to believe that it would be Hulkenberg, and finally he might get his podium, but then that's going too far into the future. But yeah, Max Verstappen and Nico Hulkenberg for me in Red Bull.
There we go. So we've got our first bold prediction so far. Then Nico Hulkenberg. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on Kvyat. I feel like, it's a pride thing now for Red Bull, for Helmut Marko certainly. They've sacked him once. Red Bull in a young driver, they look for a championship winner, someone who they feel like could win races and get them excited again. They're always searching for the next Vettel, and they've figured out Kvyat's not that, so I don't think they'll ever put him back in their car again. In that way, the Albon news didn't surprise me. Albon's got to prove himself, and Hulkenberg, he's going to be I think Hulkenberg is very frustrated with Renault. And Hulkenberg's got a choice to make. Does he, ride it out next season, hope for 2021? Because Renault seem to have, really gone strong on that idea they're going to be strong in 2021. Does he wait for that, or does he move to Red Bull now? And would Red Bull go outside the team? I think that's a bigger question. Would Red Bull go outside of their driver program for driver? And to be honest, I think they could. I mean, I'll give you my prediction. My prediction is Verstappen and Albon, and I think Albon will do well enough, and I think they'll keep him for 2020. But Albon is kind of the bottom of the barrel now for Red Bull. If Albon doesn't work, they will have to go outside the team. So if Albon has a poor end of the season, they're obviously not going to go back to Gasly. They're not going to keep Albon, and I don't think they would go back to Kvyat. So then they have to look outside the team. They would not bring a complete outsider from that's not being in F1 this season. They won't bring him into the car for next season. So that's how I think that's how Hulkenberg could get a seat at Red Bull. So those options are there certainly, but my prediction is Verstappen and Albon.
Okay, cool. That's a safe one, to be honest.
It's a safe one. So I will. Exactly.
Yeah, no. That's fine. Being safe. I mean, me going bold, you going safe. We'll reverse that in the next few teams. I'm sure of that. So that brings us to the team who will not change their lineup next season. Currently fourth in the championship, and looks like they will be finishing P4 unless something catastrophic happens. McLaren, so they have both their drivers sorted. They have their drivers tied down, and nobody's coming to poach them, as far as I know. So, and I don't know much, but then nobody's coming for them right now. So, McLaren, do you think they might consider changing, or what do you think about McLaren's lineup in general?
Well, they're locked down for 2020, aren't they? McLaren moved incredibly early to lock these two down. I'm not sure the exact Grand Prix, but it was certainly before the mid-season break. For McLaren, they're in the perfect scenario right now. They've got an experienced head, Carlos Sainz, and what Red Bull must be kicking themselves. The Sainz would have been a perfect candidate for the Red Bull seat. He was in their system. He was in Toro Rosso for a long time, but he was, unfortunately for him, he was there at the same time as Verstappen. So Verstappen obviously got the call up ahead of him, even though maybe on track Sainz had more points. But so he couldn't get into the team. So McLaren so he's the experienced head, brilliant. Lando Norris has come in, done very, very well, as we discussed in Hungary. The championship points don't reflect how well Lando's driven. He's been very unlucky, lost out a lot of points through no fault of his own, and they're in that perfect scenario where the two of them have a great relationship as well. You see on Twitter the banter they have, and you see on their YouTube page they're always releasing videos of the two of them like doing silly challenges together. And when they're interviewed together, they're one of the few drivers that they always seem to be interviewed together. Like how many drivers do you see consistently on TV interviewed alongside their teammates? It's
Yeah,
all,
now that you mentioned that, teammate bromances. I think after Ricciardo and Verstappen, the next best that we've had so far in Formula One has got to be Norris and Sainz. I mean, they will soon overtake Verstappen and Ricciardo, because Ricciardo and Verstappen had a lot of things going on the track, which they haven't had so far, the McLaren guys.
yeah.
But
And in some ways, it's obviously easier when you're not fighting for the wins and the podiums, the championships. It's
yeah,
easier.
yeah, yeah.
It's easier to get on board, but at the same time, for McLaren, it's absolutely perfect scenario. They could not be happy with their lineup, I'm sure, and obviously that's why they locked them down so early, in my opinion.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, McLaren can't have any complaints right now, and I don't think their drivers have any complaints as well, because the team has improved massively, and like we're all glad by the amount by which McLaren has improved, and the drivers. I mean, there has been an improvement in the driver quality as a whole, and yeah, the team is looking bright, and yeah, 2020 is looking good for them right now.
Okay, yep. So then moving on then to Toro Rosso, and this is an interesting one. Obviously, any Red Bull development always directly affects Toro Rosso, and they're left in a situation now where the team currently is two drivers that Red Bull have demoted. So we've got Kvyat and Gasly, that the senior team has deemed not good enough to be in their car. And when Toro Rosso is considered to be a team where Red Bull find their talent, and we know that Red Bull, we don't think Red Bull are going to go back as well. So we've seen with Kvyat, Red Bull don't like to take backward steps. So the lineup, do you feel like Gasly and Kvyat are just filling seats now, just to fill up Toro Rosso until they can find some more candidates, young drivers to move into that team and have a spot in F1?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and then that's the difficult thing, isn't it? Kind of like, because if Albon doesn't work and they don't want to go back to Gasly or Kvyat, they're in a bit of a situation there, and as I say, they would have to look outside the team. So in terms of next season, I think they'll stick with Gasly. I do. It's a difficult one. Obviously, we'll talk about this in the other podcast. But Gasly, I feel it's going to be a difficult end to the season. But he showed so much pace before. I feel like Red Bull will give him 2020 to try and get himself right. And Kvyat as well is on top form. And so many were surprised he didn't get the seat. I wasn't so much, but there's a difficult situation now because I'm not sure to also have anyone else they could put in the seat. Because I'm sure if they feel like there is a young driver in their junior team that is good enough, I'm sure they would want to do that. I don't think they would want Gasly and Kvyat in the team as long as they could. As I say, I don't think they would want those two in the team together because this is a team to find the next generation of talent, and they've already decided Gasly and Kvyat aren't that. Whether it comes around quick enough in 2020, I'm not sure. I personally think they'll start. They're obviously no strangers to inter-season changes, so by no means will it end this way. But I think they'll start 2020 with Gasly and Kvyat.
Okay, cool. So now, when it comes to my prediction, you need to remember that I predicted Hulkenberg for Red Bull.
Yes.
Which means that what I feel is Albon will do enough, will do better than Gasly in the Red Bull, but seeing that there are better options available in the market, especially a driver like Hulkenberg. I mean, we have to remember that Hulkenberg is an incredibly consistent driver who hasn't had a chance at a top car yet. So seeing that Hulkenberg is available, which he will be, Red Bull will pounce on that and grab Hulkenberg, which means Albon will have to go back to Toro Rosso, which eventually means that either one of Daniel Kvyat or Pierre Gasly is going to be axed. And looking at the mental state of both the drivers right now, I think it's going to be Gasly for the chop.
Okay. Is that for the chop completely, or well, don't tell us the team, but have you got Gasly in another team?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, because
one.
I mean, I thought about what you said in the earlier podcast, where we discussed the Red Bull transfer. Gasly is a shattered man right now, and we know what happens to shattered men in Formula One. They don't fare very well, do they?
It's true. It's a tough environment, and going with your kind of chain of events, I think that very likely could happen. Honestly, maybe the best thing for Gasly is even Kvyat will tell him a year out might not be the worst thing for his career right now.
Yeah, look at Kvyat. I mean, Kvyat is an inspiration for Gasly right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean, that's Toro Rosso. So moving on to the guys who are next to them in the championship, and I expect them to jump them come the end of the season. Alfa Romeo. So they right now have Kimi Raikkonen and Antonio Giovinazzi, polar opposites when it comes to seasons so far. That was our predictions for Toro Rosso, which was kind of tricky in all honesty. Lots of information there. But now we move on to the team which has probably been most disappointing to me this season, and I can literally tell that both their drivers right now are pretty frustrated, and I have already predicted one of them to be in Red Bull next season, and one of them was in the Red Bull in 2018. So Renault. So Ben, what do you think about Renault's lineup next year? It's gonna be interesting.
It's gonna be interesting. I promise you, this is my last kind of status quo one. I mean, I should put it out there right now. I don't think it's going to be a ridiculously crazy driver market, but there are a few dominoes. There are a few dominoes that could fall, and while I won't predict it, what I will say is when if Bottas does leave Mercedes, he's going to need a seat, and Renault, I feel like is going to be one of those candidates. I feel like they're not entirely. Nico Hulkenberg is obviously frustrated with the team, and I'm not sure the team are entirely kind of happy with what they get from Hulkenberg. There's definitely been a dip in form this season. I'm not sure he's just at the team, and Hulkenberg kind of Formula E's been mentioned by Hulkenberg as well. He's self-denied that. He said he's only focused on F1, but the problem is Renault's kind of stood still, and Hulkenberg will have to consider: does he want to look outside Renault, look outside Formula One at all, look outside Renault, or does he want to stay and kind of hold on to this dream that they're going to be title challenges in 2021, which is obviously what they've sold Ricciardo with? Will they try to save him? Hulkenberg might well think to himself, I know I'm not happy now, but if I stay for 2020, I will have a better idea of how the 2021 car is shaping up, and I'm still with the team, and I could have a real go in 2021. I could get my first podium. That might be on his mind. So since I haven't predicted Hulkenberg, I haven't predicted much change so far. I can't really predict Hulkenberg anywhere other than a stay at Renault for me. But this is another seat where there's a lot of options. So if Hulkenberg does go, you've got Bottas, who I think very well could end up there. This is also a seat for Ocon, a potential seat for Ocon, because this Daniel Ricciardo transfer completely came out of nowhere. Everyone was shocked. It blew everyone away. Whereas before that, Ocon was being lined up for this seat. Ocon was probably himself thought he was going to be at Renault next year, and then they pulled this Daniel Ricciardo thing out of the bag. So, and also French driver, French team, French Grand Prix back on the calendar. So that would be kind of like a brilliant selling point for Renault, and I'm sure they'd be very, very interested if Ocon became available. But having said all that, my prediction is Ricciardo and Hulkenberg.
Okay, cool. All that interesting facts and then boring at the end.
I know, I know. I gave a hope, then I just was just boring.
No, I'm used to it.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
fine. So my prediction, since I don't have Hulkenberg in the team, Daniel Ricciardo is obviously going to be there, and I have a surprise. I have a sort of probably the boldest prediction that you're going to hear in this
Okay.
podcast. I have Jack Aitken as a candidate for the second Renault seat.
Jack Hagan. No, that is fair. He's a Renault youth
I mean,
driver, isn't he?
he's he's a Renault youth driver, and watching Formula 2 this season, I have to say that he has surprisingly impressed me with his ride. I mean,
Been
he's
in the
not that
podiums,
far
isn't
off
he?
from the championship. He's like at 134 points right now, and Latifi is at 166. So he's in with a shout. But he has impressed me with his drives more than results as such. He has really impressed me for the way he has driven and for the fact that he's already linked to Renault. He's been with the team for some time now. He knows the workings of the team. He knows the team well, and he's worked with the car. So he's in with a shout. And another man who is the Renault reserve driver right now and one of my favorites who got chopped off last year quite unfairly.
Man, I know
I,
what's
I
coming.
think I think you know what's coming is Sergei Sirotkin, because I would love to see him back in Formula One, and I would love to see him in a Renault, because I think he deserves an opportunity in a better car than Williams. And I mean, I'm really interested to see what he can do, and there is a chance that he might be there, because you have to remember he's got money as well.
That is very true, and that is something which maybe could tempt Renault, considering they've taken for one of their first times since taking over the Lotus team, have taken a step back this season. So that, I mean, that could be a factor, and obviously in F1 when you're in that midfield battle, any gap you can find, any kind of edge was going to be taken, and I'm sure the money Sorokin might bring might be a factor in that Renault choice.
Yeah, and
Car,
I mean, like another factor that I have to mention is Sirotkin is as old as Ocon.
yes.
He's 23. So he's a young driver as well. He's got potential. And like he impressed me last season. I don't know how many people he impressed, but I would like to see him there. That's all.
Yeah, he's one of them, isn't he? Like, I feel like he's a little bit hard done by in the fact that he was in that Williams car, which obviously had, didn't have the pace to have him really show his potential. And obviously, it is very difficult for a young driver to stand out in those situations. Van Dorn was the same, kind of came into F1 as a bright prospect, completely walked all the junior formulas, but he came up against that McLaren car, which was where it was just awful, and he
And
had
he came
Fernando
up
Alonso.
against a double world champion as well.
Exactly. And Alonso was able to kind of produce those drives which defied the car's performance, and that's something that perhaps Sirotkin didn't do. In the same, I would equate Sirotkin with George Russell. So this season, obviously, George Russell is in the same boat. He's been saddled with this rubbish Williams car. Granted, Russell's worse, but still, they were both in poor Williams cars at the back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Williams has Russell has managed to produce a couple of drives that you've been like, oh wow, like Hungary in particular. He really kind of outperformed the car, whereas Sorokin struggled in the case he didn't essentially do that. Maybe he drove the car well, and he probably drove the car to its potential, but because he didn't have one of those races that made you sit back and go, oh, okay, this guy does have talent.
I mean,
Yeah, he
I
probably
think
got.
there was one race. I'll mention this right now. Singapore 2018. People sat up and took notice of Sergei Sirotkin that day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Crazy race.
he was in a dog of a car, and the way he defended, he was defending for his life all race, and you could see just by the amount of anger that was in Sergio Perez, how well that guy drove that day.
Yeah, he made Sergio Perez completely lose his mind, to be fair. Ugh.
So yeah, I mean, there are like a couple of instances I can point out where Sirot can really impress me. Like in that Williams car, which was clearly the slowest, I remember him qualifying 12th in one of the races, and that takes some balls, to be honest. K-Mac would be impressed by me right now, but yeah, I mean, he has talent, and I would like to see that talent come into at least let that talent get a proper exposure before you just kick him out.
You know, I'm starting to think there must be some like Russian in your family history somewhere. You seem to just be a really big fan of the Russian F1 drivers.
I mean, now that you mention it, I just looking at Formula One as a whole. I think Formula One has been extremely cruel to Russians in particular, and that's why I have extra sympathy for them.
It certainly has. It's not been the best of times with Russia as a country, certainly. But we'll move on to seventh in the championship now. Alfa Romeo just 7 points behind Renault, and obviously for me there's one seat which is sold, no doubt. Kimi Räikkönen. I've heard the only thing with Kimi will be any news on the retirement. I've heard no talk of that. He's not mentioned it. It's not been touted around, so I think it's pretty safe to say he isn't going to retire next season. So for now we'll go with that. Obviously Kimi Räikkönen has been exceptional this season. He has carried that car, carried the team. 31 of the 32 points belong to him. So then we've got the second seat now, and this is where it gets interesting. Candidates. So we've got current driver Giovinazzi, struggled to match his teammate this season. Just a 1 point scoring finish, could have been two, but the clutch. I don't know how to describe it.
It's complicated.
It is complicated, but they got thrown out of. They got 30-second penalties, Austria, Germany, so we didn't get that. I think Giovinazzi could really struggle for his seat, and now if I just list through some of the candidates, and I may ask you your opinion before we come back to me on that one. Some of the candidates, we've got Mick Schumacher, obviously Ferrari, as part of the deal, do have a say in one of the seats for this Alfa Romeo team. So we've got Mick Schumacher, which I'm sure they'll want to get into F1 sooner than later. Ocon is another candidate because Mercedes will want him on the grid next season, no doubt. I believe Toto Wolff has said as much, but even if he hasn't, or Mercedes will certainly want him on the grid next season. And then you've got Nick de Vries as well, who is the current leader of the F2 Championship. So what do you think of those shouts?
Yeah, so as you said, I mean, one of the seats is pretty much locked down. Kimi Räikkönen, he's going nowhere as of now. So yeah, so the question really is with the other seat. And Antonio Giovinazzi, I feel the Räikkönen Giovinazzi scene is kind of eerily similar to Alonso and Van Dorn. And I do genuinely believe that Giovinazzi, kind of harsh to say, but deserves to be replaced because he just hasn't been there. I mean, you can outperform a car, but you can't outperform a car so much that you get 31 out of the 32 points. So, like, he is underperforming Giovinazzi, and he's not exactly young as well. So he's what? He's gonna be 26 next season. So he's not exactly young. He's not performing to the standards. He has been closer in qualifying to Raikkonen than in the races, but then as we mentioned earlier, points aren't awarded on a Saturday. So yeah, looking at the candidates that you mentioned, Mick Schumacher right now is what 11th in the F2 Championship. So if Ferrari were to bring him into the Alpha seat next year, I feel there will be more questions than answers if you bring Mick Schumacher immediately. I mean, yeah, he got a win in Hungary, but then that was just one performance. He has 45 points in all seasons so far, and Aitken has one win as well, and he has 134 points. So you can understand the difference. He's not ready for Formula One yet. No matter what people say, he will be ready. Yes, I do see him in that seat for 2021, but right now, no. Nick De Vries is a much better shout, and I actually, in my predictions, I have Nick De Vries as the second Alpha driver because the F2. I genuinely believe that Nick De Vries will win the championship, and the F2 champion is not allowed to defend his crown in F2, right? So he's without a drive next season if he doesn't get a drive in Formula One. So I have Nick de Vries in the second seat.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I agree with that. Nick de Vries is my man in the seat, and yeah, I agree that I feel like Giovinazzi should be replaced. As much as you can say Kimi Raikkonen is a former world champion, I think some of the points you raised about Giovinazzi are very valid. As I say, 26 years old, that's past the stage now where he's got potential. If he's not performing to the level required, when when he's at this age now, you've got to say, will it ever be there? And you're probably going to say no. And at the end of the day, you shouldn't have your teammate scoring over 90% of the points of the team. At the end of the day, you're in the same car, so to be shown up that much by a teammate is not a good look, no matter who it is.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mentioned it, you can't have your teammate scoring 90% of points. Even Gasly scored 25% of the points scored by Red Bull.
And it's not even. You could understand it if it would be more acceptable if it wasn't. Kimi Raikkonen had a good amount of points for Alpha as he does, and he could have outscored him massively, and then you could say, oh, fair enough, Raikkonen's is a former world champion, very experienced driver, he's obviously going to outscore Giovinazzi. But it's because Giovinazzi only has one. So, for example, say Raikkonen has 31, but Giovinazzi has, I don't know, like 17 points. That would put him ahead of Albon in the standings, in 15th. If he had those, because then to get 17 points, that's a few point scoring finishes. Probably about 4 or 5, maybe about 6. So then it doesn't look as bad. But because Raikkonen has almost 99% of the points, and the fact is Giovinazzi's only contributed 1, then that makes it look a lot worse. And yeah, I agree on that point. I also agree on Mick Schumacher. Whoever is in this second Alpha seat, or whoever is in any of the Alpha seat, is keeping the seat warm for Mick Schumacher. Mick Schumacher is coming into F1. Ferrari will want to, as soon as Ferrari feel he's ready, they want him in because they want him in their own car sooner rather than later. I don't think anybody can argue with that. And I certainly would not want to be a teammate of Mick Schumacher in Formula
Leclerc
1.
Is in trouble.
Leclerc is in trouble. Because I'm sure by the time he's ready, Vettel will have left the team. So yeah, Leclerc and Schumacher. And yeah, I just asked Rubens Barrichello, I would not want to be a teammate of anybody called Schumacher, certainly at Ferrari. But yeah, as you say, that is too soon for that. And Ocon is another seat, but I think Ocon will get another seat on the grid to be revealed. But if all else fails, Ocon's an option, but that is difficult because of their ties with Ferrari. And I'm sure Ferrari won't be too happy on Alfa Romeo helping out Mercedes. And then, so my prediction is Nick de Vries will win the F2 Championship, and Nick de Vries will take the Alfa Romeo seat next to Kimi Raikkonen for the season.
Yeah. Makes sense. So now we have to move on to Racing Point, formerly known as Force India. Racing Point, so again, one of the seats is under a lockdown for lifetime. As long as that team lasts, that seat is booked, pretty much. So Lance Stroll in one of the seats. So do you see Sergio Perez continuing with the team? I'm going to put it to you directly.
I do. I feel like Sergio Perez for that team is a safe pair of hands. Obviously Mexican driver, brings the backing with that. Brings a lot of money into the team. Has been a real loyal servant of that team. Bailed them out when things were going wrong as Force India. Kind of paved the way for Racing Point to come in. I think he's a real solid pair of hands, and I don't see him having too many ideas about trying to leave the team because, at this point in his career, if he leaves the team, I don't think he's gonna go up. I know there's been talk in the past about him going to Haas. but there was a few rumours moved around last season. That was when Haas were in a considerable better position than they are now. So I mean, it's certainly on the table. I mean, it could happen. I mean, I'm sure Haas are going to be in the market for a couple of new drivers, and if Perez came on the market, I'm sure Haas would, discuss that. I'd be open to that. But from his perspective, I don't think that would be an appealing move. I don't think certainly Racing Point would do everything they could to keep him. So yeah. If you ask me, Perez will be in the team next year. As you rightly say, there is only 19 seats in F1 because Lance Stroll is in his father's team. So that's just not happening, is it? The only way it's going to happen is if it obviously if a top 3 team came knocking for Lance Stroll, but he's nowhere near that level, so that's not going to happen. But yeah, that's the only way he would leave that team. He certainly would never leave it for another midfield runner. So yeah, Stroll and Perez for me.
Yeah, so I have another poll prediction in this one. So yeah, so obviously one of the seats is Lance Stroll. Ocon in the other seat.
Okay.
Ocon coming back to the team which he left. Now I'll tell you why. Because I have Checo in another seat. Because see, first of all, I feel Checo has been in that team for far too long. He's been in that team for 6 or 7 years now. So I feel that he's starting to. I mean, that is what I get at least. He's starting to look for a change somewhat. It might not be evident to everybody, obviously. But then, I mean, a personal opinion. He might be looking for a change, and yeah, he will stay in F1, but then he won't stay in this team. And as we all know, Lance Stroll's best buddy is Ocon in the paddock, and he will be doing everything to get his buddy a seat. So last year he couldn't, but this year he will, and you will have Ocon coming into the seat. And yeah, see, another factor that comes into this decision is if Ocon doesn't make it to the Mercedes seat next year, so as we have Bottas there already, he won't be cutting his Mercedes ties. And at the same time, without cutting his Mercedes ties, if he can get a seat, that is probably the best situation for him, right? So, and without cutting his Mercedes ties, he can either go to Williams or he can go to Racing Point. And Racing Point is obviously the better choice of the two. So I have him at Racing Point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We'll see. Williams already have, in essence, a lone driver for Mercedes. So they've already got Russell. I don't think, as a team, Williams would want to. And obviously, Williams tend to like to use that second driver as. I mean, I feel a bit harsh saying it, a bit of a pay driver. Williams like to explore the commercial opportunities with the second driver because when you have a lone driver from a big team, there's obviously the advantages that they're usually very talented, but you don't get kind of the commercial boost you might get of a different driver. Says that, and also, yeah, it's awkward for Mercedes because their two customer teams really they're really not playing ball for them because Williams provide a car that is so slow it's hard to judge a driver's potential, and Racing Point have locked down permanently one of their seats. So, and they've got Perez right now. So, Perez, Racing Point would have to let Perez go and bring in a lone driver, which I don't think they'd be too keen to do if they were going to get rid of. So yeah, they're really kind of providing a problem for them. But yeah, but you're right though. Ocon is sort of like a shadow. I've said it before. Ocon is the shadow that hangs over like every underperforming driver. Because I mean, Ocon will be in the seat next year. Will come on. I'm sure you've kind of figured out where I think he's going to go. But Ocon will be on the grid next year, and kind of where he goes is going to change a lot of things. And that's the way this driver market goes. So one move and all our positions could be out. Because if Ocon goes to Mercedes, Bottas then needs to drive, and then Bottas will get a drive, and then that will completely reshape the whole grid. As with last year with Ricardo, nobody thought that was going to happen, and Ocon was all set to get his yellow overalls on, go to Renault, and then suddenly Ricardo rocks up, and then there we go. The whole market's up in the air. So it's it's very difficult, isn't it? But yeah, I'm going to say that's that's Racing Point. So moving on then to ninth in the championship. It's been a real struggle for them. They're still running two different cars. They're still running the current spec car and the set from Australia. I mean that just shows how much time all the team's in. The Rich Energy debacle earlier in the season. So this is the team in Haas where things aren't smooth, and the drivers as well. So we've had clashes on track where Magnussen coming on the radio saying, "Oh, I'm not comfortable driving with Roman." It's a bit of a mess. And the one thing I would say for certain is Grosjean and Magnussen will not be in the same team next year. I don't see any possible way that partnership's together. And the question Günther Steiner has to answer is: does he want one or two new drivers? And that's the way I see it going. I've got no doubt in saying that Grosjean is going to go. This is the second year in a row where he's had a very, very poor start to the season. Managed to recover it last season, probably better than he has done so far this season. Some of the mistakes he's been making, the general lack of pace, and obviously the bad atmosphere in the team he's been creating with Magnussen. So if it came down to a switch and he doesn't want those two together, I think they would choose Magnussen. I think Magnussen obviously is ahead in the championship. Magnussen has had some very, very stellar qualifyings as well. Got very high up, got fifth in one qualifying session. So I feel like he's the obvious choice. But then again, Magnussen is not nailed on for that seat though, isn't he? I feel like if you're going to get rid of one, it's Grosjean. But equally, I don't know if you agree on this, they could just get rid of both.
Yeah, I mean, that is realistically possible. And I mean, a lot of people would agree with you on that, saying that Haas would, rather change both drivers because both of them are underperforming according to a lot of people. But the thing with me is, I think, Grosjean is surely going now because I think we've had the best of him, we've had the worst of him, and now it's time to go. Seriously, like, come on. He's gone. And I have Checo in that seat in place of him. So,
okay.
Yeah, so Checo is on the grid, but he is there. So Sergio Perez for the second seat. And I think Magnussen will be the leader of the team for now. Because I feel that having, especially when the team is in such disarray, having a completely new driver lineup can throw the team off even further, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Which is why I feel that there is a certain need to have at least one common face in the car. And since Magnussen has been, according to me, sort of significantly better than Grosjean this season, I feel Magnussen. And another factor that nobody seems to take into consideration is that Roman is well into his 30s and Kevin Magnussen is 25 or 26. So Kevin Magnussen has got a lot of time in him. Roman hasn't got that. So, yeah, I feel that is one factor that might eventually decide between Magnussen and Grosjean. And apart from that, he has had stellar qualifyings as well, as you mentioned. Magnussen to lead the team, especially because he's already been with the team for 3 years now. 2020 would be his fourth year with the team. So he's good. He'll remain. And so Kevin Magnussen and Sergio Perez, that's one fiery pairing again. But yeah, I think that can benefit the team in more ways than one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do like. I've not really thought about it that way, but that point you make about Magnussen leading the team through hard times, I really like that. I feel like they will stick with him. So one of my drivers is Magnussen, and I mean I had a difficult time picking my second Haas driver because there was a few potentials. I mean I've got De Vries written down. Obviously again, Haas have kind of less Ferrari ties now, so they could have. They're more open to picking who they want for that second seat, but so Nick De Vries is an option. I've got Kvyat on my list as well because I feel like this could be the year. This could be the decision that Kvyat thinks. Well, I'm done at Red Bull. They don't want me in the car clearly. So why would I be at Toro Rosso? And he knows he's living on borrowed time, because if Red Bull don't want him for the main car, the second somebody comes up that they were interested in as a future Red Bull driver, he's going to be moved on for Toro Rosso. So he knows he's living on borrowed time. So he's going to be looking for options out of that team. And I was thinking Haas could potentially be one. Obviously,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll come to you on that one then. Is the Kvyat. Is the Kvyat fan of the two of us? I don't know what you think about that.
No,
Kvyat's
I mean,
options moving forward in F1.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can make a separate video on that. Like, seriously, this guy deserves. I mean, according to me at least. But then, yeah, this guy deserves a podcast on himself for the ups and downs that he has faced, and yeah, what lies ahead.
Okay, so my other options I had De Vries, Kvyat. I also had Pietro, the current reserve driver. Has been done a few practice sessions for them. Pietro Fittipaldi, obviously son of
Yeah.
Emerson. Obviously, I didn't take this one particularly. Sorry, grandson of Emerson Fittipaldi. Didn't take that one particularly seriously. He's one of the people who's probably only there on name. And looking at him, he's currently driving in this series I've never heard of, called the Deutsche Tourenwagen Masters. Never heard of it. 2018-19 drove the Endurance Championships. Season before IndyCar Super Formula. Yeah, he's kind of not in the whole traditional F3, F2, F1. He's not kind of in that league at the minute. So I don't think they'd draft him in for that, to be honest. I didn't take that particularly seriously, but it's a name, and obviously if you've got a reserve driver, you obviously think he's got somewhat talented, and that gives you links into the team, so you can't completely ignore a reserve driver. But yeah, my choice is Esteban Ocon. This is the seat I think Ocon will have. I feel like Ocon. I think it's going to be a close one thing. I really do, but I think Mercedes will play it safe and go Bottas. So that leaves Ocon needing a seat. Yeah, your racing point theory is an interesting one. If Perez was to move on, I'm sure he will, but I feel like Ocon's going to try and be proactive this time, because Ocon got caught out last time by kind of he was sitting back and waiting, and then but the cards kind of never fell his way. Nothing ever opened up for him, so I feel like this time he's going to be desperate for a seat. So he is going to be kind of pushing in. He's going to be an early move. So I could see Ocon kind of knocking on Guntersteiner's door, be like, hello, I'm here.
Yeah, you need a driver.
I get exactly. So I feel like this is the seat for Ocon.
Yeah, cool. Well, so that brings us to the backmarkers, or at least this season and last season. The backmarkers are clearly the slowest car right now, even though they have one of the most talented drivers, according to me, in their seat, and they have the Mahavir Raghunathan version of F1. I mean, meaning no offense to Polish fans of Robert Kubica, but then he has been sort of like Mahavir Raghunathan has been in Formula 2, because he's been so much off the pace compared to the rest of the field, even to his teammate. I mean, like, I expect a drop at the summer break, but then I probably don't think it will happen. So yeah, there has to be a change at the end of the season, obviously. And like you mentioned in the Hungary podcast, that even if Williams don't drop him, Robert Kubica should himself walk up to Claire Williams and say, "Thank you very much for the opportunity," but then it's not working out, and it's clearly not working out. So who do you have in the second Williams seat?
I have Nicholas Latifi in that seat. Current second place in the F2 Championship, 30 points behind Nick De Vries. 4 rounds to go. It's gonna be tough to haul him in, but he's competed in numerous practice sessions now, and he's Williams reserve and test driver, so he's been in that Williams car plenty this season certainly. So I feel like he's an obvious choice, really. Yeah, so I've gone the Latifi.
Yeah, and we can finally agree on one driver. So, I mean, yeah, so George Russell is obviously going to be there unless Mercedes pulls off some miracle. So yeah, so I have Nicholas Latifi for that seat, especially because I feel that this is probably Latifi's last chance for an F1 seat, and he's going to pull out all the stops. And
Yeah.
as far as I know, he has a lot of financial backing as well. So, like you mentioned just a few minutes before, that Williams tend to treat the second seat for a pay driver. He he has the potential to be a pay driver, and he has the potential to be a really talented driver as well. So he's kind of in the middle. So he's kind of the perfect fit for the Williams second seat, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think Williams have been no stranger to a pay driver, and maybe one which is less talented than the options that are out there. Certainly, but yeah, Latifi seems to be that kind of perfect mix of the money and also the performance as well. Obviously, he's has 4 wins this season in F2, a couple more podiums, and they're going to be looking to move forward, and obviously any money they get in from this second driver, and any closer links to Mercedes they can get for looking after George Russell, is going to be very welcome. Obviously, they look like they're making positive steps, but obviously there's still a hell of a long way to go to even join the midfield. But
Yeah, I mean,
Russell is without doubt going to be there.
for us, I mean, yeah, I think we both feel sad for Russell. But then, yeah, it does look bleak right now. But then, yeah, you have to hope that, I mean, obviously, realistically, we can only hope and do nothing else. Hope that they can join the midfield at least at the start of next season, because I don't really see them doing it this season. So yeah, maybe they can work on something next season and just join the midfield somehow.
Yeah, hopefully, because we're in the senior season now where Williams will be at the back no matter what they do. Even if they develop their car all the way to the end of the season, they would be at the back. I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to just completely write the season off and say, well, right, this was a horror show from start to finish. Right, let's write this car off and let's put all our energy and all our resources into building the 2020 car and getting a jump start on that and trying to move forward. I think that's what they need to do now.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I echo the feelings. And yeah, so those were our 2020 driver lineup predictions. And I think both of us made quite a few bold predictions there.
We
So
did.
yeah,
We've got some. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting market for sure. Obviously, I feel like you've gone a lot more bold than I have. Um, so we'll see kind of who's right there. We'll keep an eye on it. But as I said before, it's one of the drivers' market is it's such a strange entity, such a fluid entity. One move can completely throw off everything. One move out of the blue, and all our predictions will just have to go out the window. So we could have got the ball wrong. You never know. This is when
yeah.
Max Verstappen turns up in a Mercedes next season, and then there we go.
If Max Verstappen turns up in a Mercedes next season, the world is gonna go crazy. Trust me
Oh,
on that.
imagine
I
that.
mean,
That would be an I don't think it's going to happen, but that would be an absolute dream. Those two in a team together, that would be insane.
I mean, like Formula One actually might double its viewership in a single season if those two
I
are in the
think
same
so.
team.
They've only really They've only really gone wheel to wheel twice. Those 2 times were brilliant entertainment, and actually Verstappen was one out twice. Verstappen held him off. Actually, Verstappen held him off in USA. Hamilton had to go off the track, and in almost an identical
Yeah,
move, Hamilton went off the track at Hungary and got past
yeah.
him on strategy, not on track. So it's 2-0 Verstappen if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, but then Lewis fans. Hey, you are a Lewis fan, yeah?
I
Don't
am a
say
Lewis.
don't say that.
Exactly. So that shows you how highly I think of Verstappen that I've given him that compliment there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree because along with being a Kvyat and a Sirotkin fan, I'm also a Verstappen fan. Yeah, so that is the end of it, and yeah, we will be back with uh, more content, more silly season content, and we will be looking at the F2 table as well very soon. And yes, we will be on the lookout for the driver market. And as soon as some surprising move happens, or if one of our predictions are proven wrong, we will be back at it as soon as possible.